Right, okay, I think I can crack on then. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming along to listen to my talk today. My name's Danielle Kelly, so I'm a lecturer in the psychology department. And so today I'm going to just be talking to you about the dark side of the internet and finding the light, the technological facilitation and mitigation of cyberstalking behaviour, which is a title I'm very proud of. So the talk today is going to introduce what cyberstalking is and how we can characterise cyberstalking perpetrators. And we'll also talk about how technology is used in cyberstalking behaviour and how we can start using technology to combat that. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I will try to avoid tangents where possible, and we should have some time at the end for questions and discussion if you would like. All right. So where do we start? So we should start at the very beginning, which is the issue of problematic behaviour online. Now, we know that there are actually good aspects about the internet. We know that even apart from the functional parts of it, it can be hugely beneficial for things like social connectedness, and that's only really become more important during the pandemic. There is, however, the other side of the internet, and I think this quote actually summarises it quite well. So whilst there is incredible positivity online, there's also the opposite issue of significant problematic behaviour. And these behaviours can be quite broad, and the research I do tends to focus on behaviours that fall under the umbrella of cyber aggression. And that can be defined as the intent to harm an individual or group through the use of technology or electronic devices. And the thing is, cyber aggression can really be perpetuated by anyone who has access to the internet, and anyone of any age. So as you can imagine, that's a huge population now. And the thing is, there are various types of cyber aggressive behaviour. So, I mean, cyberbullying is probably one of the more common terms that we hear being used to describe cyber aggression online. So the use of electronic communication to bully a person, and typically that includes sending messages, threatening or intimidating someone through electronic means. And you've probably also come across the term of trolling, which we've probably also seen online quite a bit. And we use these frequently to talk about someone making deliberately provocative comments or posts, and then they just kind of wait for someone to take the bait, to take them up in an argument, basically. And in comparison, cyber harassment, kind of very similar to cyberbullying, and is threatening or unwanted advances directed at someone else using the internet and other forms of communications. The thing is, these terms are often used interchangeably, but as I say, they all kind of fall under the umbrella of cyber aggression, and they all have their separating characteristics, if you like. And so there is some confusion over how these terms are differentiated, but luckily there is consensus of how cyberstalking can be defined. And it's defined as repeated, persistent and deliberate use of the internet and technology to frighten, intimidate or harass someone. And it can take a variety of forms, and this includes obviously monitoring someone online, whether that be their online activity or their physical location. It can be posting false accusations or manipulating people's posts online, or using other content that can be used to damage someone's reputation. And they can also use varieties of technology to threaten people, and they can often manipulate technology or online accounts to help them monitor or threaten others. So how common is cyberstalking? So the Suzy Lamplugh Foundation, I've just realised I spelled that wrong on the slide, I do apologise, released a report in 2021 with the National Stalking Helpline, and suggested that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men will experience stalking in their lifetimes. In 2018, national crime statistics highlighted that 15% of harassment and stalking offences were flagged as having some sort of online element. Now, in comparison, in 2020, advisors from the National Stalking Helpline reported that when they had received calls and emails, at least 80% of those calls and emails mentioned online stalking behaviours. And during the pandemic, this actually rose to 100% of cases. that have been presented to the 100% of cases presented to the National Stalking Helpline now involve a cyber element. Okay, so there are various ways that perpetrators can actually use technology to access victims. And this table was actually taken from the same report called Unmasking Stalking from the National Stalking Helpline and the Suzy Lamplugh Trust. And it kind of highlights that reports from cyberstalking are often included through social networking sites. And as you see, before the first lockdown, if the stalking started before the first lockdown, sort of contact was made 59% of the time through social networking sites. When the first lockdown started, however, that increased to 82%. Now, that's not saying that social networking is the only way that provides access. There are obviously, as you can see in the table, other ways that cyberstalking perpetrators can gain access to individuals. And this includes unauthorized access to online accounts to people's devices, and we'll go through how they might do that a bit later. Through their emails, through direct messaging. People have actually been contacted via their workplace online as well. So as you can see, there's a number of ways that cyberstalking perpetrators can contact people, and often they're quite adaptable to that as well. So it's not necessarily that they're only contacting their victims through one source. So from what we can see from the National Stalking Helpline, it does look like cyberstalking is becoming more prevalent, or stalking with an online element is becoming more prevalent, particularly during the pandemic. So why has it become more prevalent? Well, unfortunately, one of the things is access or accessibility, and technology has definitely provided more accessibility, as we could see from the previous table, especially through social networking. But whether this be through social media or surveillance technology, it's advancing rapidly, and it's increasing opportunities to access victims' accounts or access very personal information to them. And the thing is, the internet also affords a lot of anonymity to individuals. It's possible to hide your identity online, and often that is attractive to those who want to stalk their victims. The flip side of that is the information that is available online. So in some cases, individuals can provide a lot of information about themselves online, and we are getting better at raising awareness of online security, but there are still issues of cyberstalking perpetrators managing to access quite a lot of personal information online. And so whilst we don't have a model that specifically addresses cyberstalking behaviour yet, we do have models that have been adapted to explain it, and one of which is known as the AAA engine. This was designed to sort of provide components of sexual offending behaviour online. And it kind of highlights three key areas that explain why people might feel like the internet is a good place to engage in sexual behaviour. And as you can see, the first of these is accessibility. In the case of the AAA engine, they're talking about the ease of access to pornography, to sexual experiences online, anytime, day or night. And that accessibility is also part of cyberstalking behaviour as well, the ease at which they can gain access. And the second factor, like cyberstalking as well, is an anonymity. So people might feel that they are not anonymous and unknown online, and often this can result in a person detaching their online behaviour from their offline life and their offline identity. And the other big thing is that if you're not face-to-face with someone, if they are able to do it virtually, then it can also allow people to depersonalize others online. It's much easier to do that online than it is face-to-face. And the final factor is affordability. So again, this engine refers to pornography and sexual experiences online as being quite low cost and being free. But actually, again, as we talk about the advancement in technology and the advancement in online sources, then again, these are also at a low cost and free and allow further accessibility to victims. And so the next model is built on the triple engine model, and it considers two other factors that I thought that were actually sort of contribute to develop online addiction, but again are quite relevant to cyberstalking behaviour as well. And the first is convenience. And at the time, this referred to being online and being able to meet others in places like emails, chat rooms, news groups, role-playing games. Now, again, this is only expanded. You know, this has only got bigger. The number of ways that we have to meet people online has just increased exponentially from that point. And again, that's providing opportunity. And the other thing is that it provides a familiar and comfortable environment online. So online sexual behaviours often occur in familiar and comfortable environments of home, even in the workplace, and that kind of reduces the feeling of risk. And that allows people to feel like they can engage in more adventurous behaviours, which can potentially be quite addictive. And the final part of the model is escape. And for some, a big reason why they would engage in cybersex or sexual gratification online is that it creates some sort of high. There's a mood modifying experience that is characteristic of addiction. But again, it provides the potential for people to reinforce behavior. And again, that can be used in understanding cyberstalking behavior again, in that can create mood modifying experiences that can sort of reinforce cyberstalking behavior. So and often online romantic or sexual behavior, it can provide an escape from real life. And if this keeps being reinforced, then that can actually sort of create a continuum that leads to addiction. So again, these models are historic and they're not written to deal specifically with cyberstalking behavior, but hopefully you can see that the parallels between cyberstalking behavior, the opportunities to cyberstalk victims, and how these motivations can map onto these models. And it allows us to provide some idea of why people might choose to stalk their victims online. Okay, so the motivations aren't necessarily just about accessibility and convenience. Sometimes it is actually about psychological characteristics. And in 1996, Wright and colleagues started categorizing cyberstalking behavior according to different factors. So these included the nature of the relationship between the victim and stalker. And often this is what we hear about when people talk about cyberstalking, which is the idea of domestic relationships versus non-domestic, acquaintances, friends, lovers, in comparison to strangers. And it's not just the nature of the relationship, but also the content itself. So the content of the communications themselves, you've got the non-delusional versus the delusional types of communication, which we'll go into in a bit more depth in a minute. But there's also the level of risk to the victim, which was a categorization of low, medium, or high in terms of aggression. And again, that will depend on the type of cyberstalking perpetrator, and also feeds into the motivations of the stalker. So whether they are infatuated with their victims or angry with them. Interestingly, Wright and colleagues also included outcomes for the case of the stalker in their categorization. So whether that was legal action, whether they became victims of suicide, or whether there was a psychiatric element. And so Wright came up with the initial typology of cyberstalking perpetrators, which highlighted 4 main classifications. And these classifications are still quite well known. The first is the intimate perpetrator, and often I think that's what people consider when they think about stalking behavior, and that's the attempt to form a relationship with the victim, and if that relationship is rejected or they don't get the response that they want, they then turn on the victim themselves. The vindictive perpetrator is different in that they go out to inflict pain on their victims, and they're quite cruel in the way they attack. The composing perpetrator has a slightly different motive in that they're not really there to inflict pain, but mainly to annoy and irritate the victim, not so much to inflict at least physical pain on them. And then finally, we've got the collective perpetrator, and this is interesting because this isn't necessarily an individual. These are often groups, and these groups form for the purpose of destroying a person or an organization. So they tend to have a common belief or cause between them that makes them want to work together. Okay, And since then, this typology has been expanded, and it was expanded by Mullen in 1999 to consider sort of dividing these categorizations and expanding on them. And hopefully you'll see as we go along how these have been sort of broken down slightly. And so the first categorization is what's known as a rejected cyberstalker. Yeah, and this is fairly self-explanatory in that cyberstalkers who fall into this category are motivated to stalk their victim because they believe that something has been done to them, that they have been wronged in some way. Often it's a relationship being ended, or divorce, or separation. And often the offenders that fall into rejected cyberstalker category believe that they can reverse the breakup, that they can go back to the way they were. But then when that doesn't happen, they feel angry, they seek revenge, because the fact that their attempts at reconciliation have been rebuffed, if you like. In comparison, the resentful cyberstalker, again, these can often be dangerous because of their perceived motivation for why they stalk their victims. And resentful cyberstalkers, again, they actually rely and know that the victim is aware of the stalking. They actually want to know that, but they will continue to go after this vendetta that they feel the victim deserves to be dealt with because of this vendetta. They are motivated by creating fear and distress in their victims. That's what they aim to do. And these types of cyberstalker believe that the victim deserves to be afraid because they have caused the cyberstalker distress in some way. So in comparison to resentful and rejected cyberstalkers, intimacy seekers don't actually feel any resentment or anger at all. They actually want a relationship with the victim. They often see their victims as soulmates, and they believe that they're destined to be together at all costs. In their mind, they believe that it's their job and their purpose to make sure that they have a loving relationship with this person. And often intimacy-seeking cyberstalkers are the ones that are highlighted in the media, the version of cyberstalkers that harass celebrities and public figures, because they often have this sort of distorted perception that their victims are their soulmates. And they're often not particularly aware of the fear or the distress that they're causing the person that they are stalking. And incompetent suitors have similar motivations to intimacy seekers in the sense that they believe they are strongly infatuated with the people that they stalk. They often fixate on their victim, so their entire wake in life is focused on creating a relationship with this person. Stalkers who fall into sort of incompetent suitor category often lack social skills or communication skills, but they do feel entitled to the relationship with their victim, so they assume that it's inevitable, it's going to happen, so they go on and they feel like they deserve a relationship with the victim. And because they have that entitlement, that builds until eventually the cyberstalker increases their frequency of contact. The main difference between intimacy seeker and cyberstalkers and incompetent suitors is that incompetent suitors do tend to be more gradual in how they contact their victims. And the final typology that was proposed by Mullen was known as the predatory stalker, and these can be the most dangerous and determined, because unlike the other categorizations, these are the cyberstalkers that are motivated by perverted sexual need. Often they can fantasize about sexual acts with their victims. They can include, and their motivations include planning attacks on them. And unlike intimacy seekers and incompetent suitors, these types of cyberstalkers, they don't feel any motivations to have relationships with individuals that they're stalking. That's not the aim. In fact, their aim is to dominate and victimize. They really have limited, if any, concern at all for the welfare of their victims. And last but not least is the ghost cyberstalker, and this is actually a relatively new categorization, and it wasn't in Dr. Mullen's 5 stalker profiles, and it's also unique to those who use the internet, which is why it's relatively new. Ghost cyberstalkers, they attack solely online, and they can't be identified by the victim. It doesn't necessarily mean that the victim doesn't know them, it just means that they can't be identified by them. The ghost cyberstalker often just repeatedly makes direct and indirect threats towards their victim. These can be threats of physical harm, but they set out to inspire fear. And Interestingly, this type of cyberstalker can represent sort of an amalgamation of the other 5 types. But it can also just be a predatory a troll or a sadistic online user who really has no connection to the victim at all. And unlike the other types of stalker profile, ghost cyberstalkers completely rely on anonymity. And obviously that's why it's very relevant to online users, because obviously that allows them a veil of anonymity that is quite key to their ability to stalk their victims. So one of the key things about cyberstalking behaviour is that they are often adaptable to changes in behaviour of the victim. So if a victim gets rid of one platform, for example, they'll find a way of accessing another. And so what we're going to look at now is how cyberstalkers practically use these online platforms and other versions of technology to actually facilitate the behaviours. So the first one I'm going to talk about is what's known as spoofing. So some of you may already know, I know what spoofing is, but it's a term that describes the ability of someone to mask or hide their actual phone number and put another phone number in that place. Normally a phone number they've chosen, and that number then shows up on the recipient's caller ID or our phone. So often, it's not necessarily just cyberstalkers, but abusers in general, they can use spoofing to pretend that they are someone else, especially if you won't pick up the phone for the abuser's number or the stalker's number if you know it. So they will pretend to be someone else that will make you pick up the phone. And they can pretend the number is from various sources, and often it's including sources that you will always pick the phone up for. So making you believe that you're getting a phone call from a family member or from a lawyer or from medical professionals. And it's not just necessarily the stalkers trying to contact the victims. They can also manipulate the number to look like the victim is calling other people. And they can use this to cause manipulations in the victim's personal and professional lives. In some cases, they use it to create false records of the victim calling them, in case the victim decides to report to the police or courts for harassment or stalking. The only saving grace about this part is that with spoofing, it's easily proven that the victim didn't make the phone call, since it wouldn't appear on their phone bills, I'm chucking a pen, or their outgoing calls. And it's not just that they can, change the phone number, but some services also allow users to change not only the number, but allows them to change their voice, allows them to come across as another gender or another person, to add background noise, and also to record calls, which we'll go into in a wee second. So one of the big issues with spoofing is that, as you can probably imagine, it's difficult. It can be difficult to prove legally. So often it's reliant on other behavioural data as well to support its existence. So in some cases, this might be patterns of when calls are received. Are they received around similar times, or are they receiving similar information from those calls? And sometimes it's a case of not necessarily proving spoofing in isolation, but rather using evidence of other types of abuse alongside it. So if we just jump back to recording, so it is possible to record calls using spoofing technology, and it's not just spoofing. So stalkers might also use technology to record victims' conversations and actions, and this allows them to maintain control and power. There are recording laws, that can deal with whether, obviously, recordings can be legal and whether those recordings can be used later in court as well. In a relationship where there is domestic abuse or stalking, it may be that the stalker abuser is recording conversations or taking video to get more information on your personal life, and really it's to keep victims from having any privacy. And again, that's holding that power and control over them. They can also use it to learn about victim schedules, and possibly use information against victims later on for blackmail purposes, depending on what is recorded. And recording forms only, really a small part of surveillance equipment. And if we're talking about electronic surveillance, we can use that as a broad term to describe when someone watches another person's actions or monitors conversations without the user's knowledge or consent. And often it's obviously done using electronic devices or platforms. And again, where there is domestic abuse or stalking, an abuser would use recording and surveillance technology to keep tabs on the victim. That can often be to monitor their whereabouts or their conversations. And again, it's used to make it hard for the victim to have any privacy and also to have a life separate from the abuser or the stalker. In the case of domestic abuse, it can also be used to try and discover and stop any plans that victims have of leaving the abuser as well. And electronic surveillance can be done by misusing cameras, recorders, wiretaps, social media, email. It can also include the misuse of monitoring software, so spyware. And as we're probably aware, spyware can be installed on computers, on tablets and smartphones, and can really secretly monitor device activity without anyone even knowing it. Spyware can allow the person access to everything on the phone, as well as the ability to intercept and to actually listen in on phone calls that the victims are making. But in some cases, spyware is not even necessary to actually monitor the whereabouts of someone. Information can be made available to contacts that can actually help stalking perpetrators, especially if you're not aware that you are friends, for example, your Snapchat friends with the stalker. So if you're using Snapchat with Snap Maps enabled, that provides a huge amount of information to a cyberstalking perpetrator. There's other simple things like frequent social media posts that detail schedules or frequent appointments. If you're being surveilled in depth, as you probably are by a cyberstalking perpetrator, then again, they can use that information and build it up and use that information to monitor your whereabouts. And again, as I said earlier, it's not necessarily just the monitoring, but also it can be a very active manipulation or an active threat, and that can often come through impersonation. So we've probably seen, impersonation at some stage when someone decides to use a false identity. This false identity can be created in numerous ways, and often it can be used for different reasons. It can be used for personal gain, so using someone else's identity to gain something for yourself. But in some cases, it is used to deceive or harm another person. And it often involves the use of technology. One of the most common ones is obviously social media. So being able to create fake social media accounts in the victim's name, being able to log into accounts by either having the password or guessing the password. Or, as we said earlier, manipulating technology to make it seem like communication is coming from the victim themselves. If someone has impersonated a victim, they can gather confidential personal information about the victim from their friends, from their family, even from their employer or their medical records. They can spread, really harmful information about the person, or, can even create, false evidence if you were to, again, report them to the police or to the courts. Excuse me, they can create false evidence that really cast doubt on what the victim is telling them. Some abusers and stalkers have actually sort of manipulated further and created fake messages to make it look like they're actually the ones being stalked or harassed. And again, they may impersonate the victim or someone else online as a way to learn information about the whereabouts of their victim, or actually trick the victim into meeting them in person. And if we go even a wee bit more old school than social media, we've also got email. And I'm sure we've all received many phishing emails in our time. But stalkers can create fake email accounts that's not necessarily connected to their name for similar reasons. So they can use the accounts to send harassing emails that looks like they are coming from someone else, or at least masks their identity. The only good thing about this is that in many cases, the original sender can be tracked down with the help of law enforcement and police. So abusers can also send emails from fake accounts. They can trick you into opening messages that contains viruses or spyware. And obviously, if you're not aware that you've done this, you then have spyware on your computer that you're not aware of. They can create email accounts in, again, the person's name, so to allow them to send emails to others pretending to be the victim. This could be done to try and embarrass the victim, discredit them, or even put them at risk of harm. and often they have other negative consequences. So they can, they can use private information to pose as the victim on the internet, and invite others to harass or put them in danger. So, for example, a stalker can create an advertisement posing as the victim to direct others to use you for escort services or massage services. Or, if they have your address, they can invite others to come to the victim's home or call the victim's home for a specific purpose. This was actually a story recently about a GP that had a falling out with his builder. I think it was over a fence. The GP believed they'd been ripped off and posted the builder's name, phone number, and address on a gay escort website. Now, his argument was he just wanted to wind the builder up, and he felt that he had been cheated and that the builder was a cowboy. But the judge didn't feel that way, and he did get charged with harassment. And these can, be very, very serious. They can have very serious consequences. So some stalkers can use impersonation and actually encourage other people to sexually assault you. And an abuser can include information on the advertisement about rape fetishes or rape fantasies and ask someone to carry out this fantasy. So obviously the purpose of this is that if this person turns up to sexually assault you, they think that the victim's protest, the victim's resistance is part of some type of role play. So in this case, the person who obviously has sexually assaulted the victim would be charged with rape, but so would the person who organized the post, so would the stalker in this case. So yeah. So again, we can go back to monitoring, but this is probably one of the bigger types of monitoring, which is obviously GPS. And GPS can be used lawfully in a lot of ways. Some parents use it to keep an eye on where their child has gone. Judges can order it for someone on probation. The thing is that GPS monitoring is becoming cheaper. It's becoming more advanced, and small and easily hidden. So it's getting harder and harder to know which devices have tracking capabilities, and that allows stalkers to misuse the technology to track locations pretty easily. For example, nearly all our mobile phones now have GPS technology, and that can easily be manipulated, especially if a stalker can gain access to your phone and they can tell them where you are and where you have been. So again, building an understanding of schedules or frequent visits. And again, because they're so small and easily hidden, GPS monitoring devices can be hidden in belongings in cars. It can also be used to track you through your phone. And although GPS is not necessarily automatic, GPS on your phone is not necessarily automatically available to another person, but there are a variety of ways a stalker can get that information. So, for example, if you're quite close to your abuser or to your stalker and they share a mobile phone plan with you, they can access that through that. If they can access your mobile phone account, or they have other ways of accessing your information. So again, if they've placed spyware on your phone, if they've downloaded apps, or if information from your phone has been synced to the cloud on your computer and they have access to that. And again, it's about stalkers managing to maintain power and control, not allowing the victims any privacy or autonomy. And the last but not least, the last sort of technology that I want to talk about is the Internet of Things. Now, again, you probably already know about this. And the Internet of Things, refers to physical objects embedded with sensors, processing ability, software. These devices could often connect and exchange data with other devices over the internet or other communication networks. So the Internet of Things is relatively new in terms of cyberstalking. There hasn't been a lot of work done around cyberstalking yet, but there has been some done on domestic abuse. In May 2018, Ross Cairns was convicted of stalking his wife, Catherine. They were estranged at the time. And he had actually hacked into the smart home hub installed in the kitchen to spy on Catherine. And he'd also used a mobile app to log into their iPad and listen to her conversations with her mum. Now it's 2018, but this was one of the first recorded instances of IoT technology being used to abuse and stalk a partner. And in this instance, it was the wireless system used to control lighting, central heating, alarms, all of these types of technologies. So there is some work being done in terms of cyberstalking at the minute, but it's definitely something that needs to be expanded on. All right, so we know the technology has been used to facilitate cyberstalking, but it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all bad news. So we can also use it to combat behaviour. And we are still working on it, but some research has come out from Bournemouth University to highlight ways we can start developing appropriate technologies. And one of which is automatic detection. And we know that some work has been done on automatic detection in machine learning. And the thing about automatic detection is that it can be used to let individuals know if they are being stalked. So again, that issue of not necessarily realizing what's happening. So it can be used to alert individuals to that. It can help trigger support for victims. It can help support digital forensic investigation. And so we can support automatic detection using data mining. So we can use data mining to help detect patterns in harassment texts, and we can use algorithms to help recognize and classify texts. Now the thing is, this is quite a big job, and we can sort of maybe use a hybrid approach to make this more effective, and I'll go into that in a minute or two. Okay. And as we stressed earlier, some cyberstalkers, they really thrive in anonymity, and technology is often used to hide their identities, and digital forensics can really help with tracing perpetrators and unveiling their identities, if you like. And again, the same work from Bournemouth suggested that specialized software could be designed to record and control the scene, if you like, where cyberstalking has occurred, obviously with the user's consent. Now, what they've also highlighted is that the thing about specialized software to sort of figure out where these perpetrators are, who these perpetrators are, it needs to be able to capture data from a local host of the victim, rather than so sort of avoiding the man in the middle problem, if you like, because obviously if they've encrypted the data, it can't be monitored. So there's still a bit of work to be done on that. And there are other techniques that we can use. So we can use authorship analysis, and that can be very useful to take contextual clues out to predict information. It can be used to sort of identify things like the age of the person that is doing the stalking. And there are some techniques that can help link media files that's shared online to the identity. So if the stalking perpetrator has been sharing media files, pictures, for example, one of the techniques highlighted was sensor pattern noise, and it can sort of act as a fingerprint, and can be used to sort of associate a picture that has been sent to a social media account with similar images. And this would be especially useful if there's a suspect that has already been identified, and could make the investigation a lot easier. But one of the things we want to do is make sure that we're actually shielding unwanted communication. So it's not just about dealing with it once it's happened, but also dealing with it, shielding that communication. So we've also got, we've obviously got the use of safe search, and we've got parental controls, especially in antivirus software. So things like Kaspersky and Norton. But the thing is, obviously, these aren't very specialized. They're very much about obviously protecting children from accessing particular sites. So recent work has demonstrated that with advances in machine learning, there are algorithms that are context-based that then can be used to take out malicious messages, to actually identify malicious messages, and that can sort of keep online chats safe. So again, sort of removing the problem before it becomes a problem. And one of the proposed tools that they mentioned was Safe Chat. And that can allow you to encrypt communication channels, which again can be really, really useful, especially if you're trying to protect yourself from stalking perpetrators. All right. So the paper highlights a hybrid approach would be most effective in dealing with cyberstalking and other problematic behaviour, not just cyberstalking itself. With automatic detection, it would be incredibly useful to have some sort of human revision, especially that when there is information that would require that. So a lot of this has to do with contextual information that might impact how a message is received. So if you think about messages from an incompetent suitor, for example, these could seem quite nice in nature, these could seem quite loving, and without context of this being a person that you don't know rather than your husband or your partner, without that context, these can seem quite harmless. So sort of psychological profiles, using psychology can help provide support in understanding sort of contextual cues to improve accuracy in some of these techniques, and can also help identify the unwanted communications that we were talking about. And so there has already been some examples of using psychology in digital forensics, one of which being behavioural evidence analysis. There's a study by Almatawa and colleagues that used BA in the forensic analysis of cyberstalking cases in Dubai over the last 5 years. And the results showed that behavioural evidence analysis that can help identify patterns and trends and psychological characteristics and behaviours, that helped to focus on investigation, and that helped better understand, helped develop an understanding of offender behaviour, but also victim behaviour, and sort of helped infer traits of the offender. And they took that from digital evidence. So again, by using these types of BAA sort of behavioural evidence analysis, they can help investigations build a stronger case. They can reduce time wasted, and often they can also exclude suspects that are wrongly accused in cyberstalking cases. So again, these kind of psychological concepts map on quite nicely to the technological aspects that can be used, and it's about making it as efficient and as accurate as possible. And it kind of works both ways. So in terms of actual support for victims after they have been victims of cyberstalking, we can use technology to provide support for them. One of which is through sort of embodied cognition agents. There has been some research using those in supporting victims and providing support for them. And it's also been used in training for police, etc. So basically, it's not just about focusing on technology or focusing on psychology. It's about the two of them working together. And with both elements working successfully, we can increase the efficiency of cyberstalking cases, but also increase our understanding and develop a better way of supporting victims, of preventing cyberstalking cases, but also making sure that we have the ability to ensure that cyberstalking cases are being reported and being dealt with accordingly by the authorities. All right, and I'm going to stop talking now. These are my references list. Happy to send them to you if you'd like. And I'd just like to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. And if you have any questions or if there's anything you want to discuss, please just ask. Thank you very much.